You're now live.
We are now live and my phone is going off, and since I don't recognize the people, it's probably telling me my car warranty is run out again. Okay, now that we've dealt with my warranty, this is the Senate Finance Committee. I'm going to call us to order. This is May 4th, and we are continuing our discussion of broadband H360. And Maria, welcome back. I hope you had a successful trip yesterday, and you should get a Purple Heart or something for getting all of this in writing by this morning.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm sure there's
well-
some things that still need some work, but
Oh, there's
And I did-
things we have not dealt with. So,
yes.
and the biggest is I got an email from Commissioner Tierney today with just some fine tuning about what the department has the personnel to provide and what, and I don't know if that went to all of you. I will make sure it does. And what they don't have the personnel to provide, like a lawyer or an administrative staff. So we need to be clear that they have authorization, or somebody does, to hire. And the other thing we haven't dealt with is the interim between right now and the first of the year, whatever time frame we're going to have this board be up and running, and making sure that we get as many dollars as possible and as much line strung as possible this year. So those are the ones we haven't. Big areas. We've got a bunch of fine tuning. So Maria, why don't you walk us through what we
Okay.
did yesterday?
Okay. And I did hear from some of you with just some additional suggestions, which I tried to incorporate and then attribute to who suggested them,
Okay.
just to kind of facilitate, move things along. I'm not sure that I covered everything, but anyway, we'll get started.
More than I could have. So let's keep going.
So this is draft 1.2, and I believe Faith has it now and has posted it to your website. So first couple of changes, you'll see the intent section is stricken here. I think your suggestion was to maybe include language similar to this under the construction grant program more specifically. So I have moved that. So it no longer appears in the overall intent for the chapter. And I did clarify that this chapter is concerned with, at the moment anyway, fixed broadband, which was the issue Senator Brock had raised yesterday to clarify.
Madam Chair.
Yep.
Yes.
I guess I've just wondered, this is maybe a small thing and maybe not, but would anyone else enjoy the suggestion that we shift the name from Vermont Community Broadband Fund or to the Vermont Rural Broadband Board? Just to articulate really what we're up to. It seems to me all of Vermont is considered rural, but anyway, I'm not going to go to the mat for it, but it struck me as an idea that maybe made sense. It's at a minimum, I would think we'd take fund out of there, but
Yep.
Oh,
And I did do that under the board's name. I took the
board
fund
name.
out. And you're right. You're probably for the chapter heading. It should either say Vermont Community Broadband Board or Vermont Rural Broadband Board, whichever you prefer.
yeah, because when
I think
I think
Vermont
that's right.
Community Broadband Board is good.
Vermont Community Broadband Board. Okay.
Yeah. And we don't get into a fight if downtown Barry is rural or not, if somebody wants to
Right.
wire it. All right.
Okay. So that's that change in the definition to get rid of the word fund.
Yep.
So right off the bat, we're going to get to the area that one of the areas that I was a little bit still unclear on. And this has to do with the definition of eligible provider. These would be providers eligible for construction grants only. And so the questions that I had and what I tried to capture here, so obviously you have CUDs, and then I included, instead of small telecommunications carrier, I used the term small communications carrier. And then subsequently in the definitions, started to lay out a definition for that term, small communications carrier. So it would include the small telecom carriers that you had before, right? The independent telephone companies, that's subdivision A. Then there was discussion about, I think, and this is, I wasn't exactly clear, whether you wanted the smaller ISPs in Vermont, such as the Mansfield Community Fiber, the Duncan Cables, maybe a smaller WISP provider. I don't know enough about their size to specify what the threshold is. So if that's your intent, you might want to get a recommendation, whether it's based on how big their business is in terms of the geographic area, the number of employees, the revenue that they have. I don't know the answer to that. But that was kind of what I'm grappling with here. So it needs more work. And maybe a little better clarity about, is this your intent? And maybe it would be helpful to look at it in context of the grant program, which also does have that kind of waiver provision that allows grants to go out that are not part of a universal service plan to any ISP for things such as a line extension, as long as it meets certain conditions. So there is some funding available for any ISP, not just a small ISP. So these are,
Right.
and maybe now's not the time to finally address this, but it's certainly something I know you'll come back to. And the other part of eligible provider, I wasn't clear if you wanted to keep in there. Eligible provider means a CUD in partnership with, and then that could be anybody, basically, another CUD, any other ISP, or an electric utility. So I did strike it here, but I wasn't 100% that was your intent.
Okay, we've had a few. We can probably send this out to Mansfield and Mr. Duncan and see if that meets their criteria. I'm pretty sure there's some ears listening to this and we'll get feedback. I think it's our intent to allow, as long as they're providing what we've said we want to provide, to allow just about everybody to apply under certain circumstances. Senator Pearson.
So I think it was my suggestion, maybe others as well, about the not more than 3 counties. I do, well, first of all, let's just take this one at a time. I don't see why we would, sorry, go back up, Maria. Striking C doesn't make any difference, I think. A CUD is an eligible provider. Who they're contracted with is a secondary question. So I don't see why we need C, and I think we should just settle that because that's more simple.
Right, C is struck, right?
That's the proposal. I just wanted to be clear that that was your intent.
Okay, and that's
Okay. So hearing no objection, I think that's settled. Then in terms of how do you define the Duncan cable people, I tried to say not more than 3 counties, so that, because there are some smaller operators that are on edges of counties, but my hunch is that does cover them. But maybe someone would say why that's a terrible idea. In terms of the number of employees, I just don't know.
Yeah.
That's a total shot in the dark. But so that was, I'll just explain that the not more than 3 counties was my shot at figuring this out. But I think we all agree on the spirit, and then
Yes.
I think that's what we're trying to get at.
So I
Just-
missed the testimony on Friday from Duncan Cable because I had to go get my shot. I mean, why are we bending over backwards to include them? Who?
no, that I don't think that's fair. Could I just summarize the testimony? Was he's not Duncan Cable strings fiber in an area covered by a CUD, and he is concerned. Sarah McDonald, you talked to him more than I did, but that the CUD will contract with Consolidated. Consolidated will come in there and offer everybody $30 internet, and the fiber that Duncan has already invested will be undercut because Consolidated can just sort of run them out of town. And so there are a few like that. He's not a telecom because there's no phone engaged. It's been truly a cable, which, as we know, the state doesn't.
Cable TV is what he's been doing.
Yeah, which the state doesn't regulate. So trying to not exclude these people. Same with up this way is Mount Mansfield Fiber, which is CUD like, but it's not. It's not a telecom because they don't deal with phone other than VoIP. And
That's
so,
the Nulties.
yeah, so it's hard to figure out how to include them because they're not defined right now. They're just running around operating as a business that's not a telecom business. But I don't think we mean to exclude them. They're to me, they're the Franklin telephones, except for without a telephone.
But they do fiber. That was the.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
because when I
do.
heard cable, I was like, oh, are they cable
Well,
providers?
he does
I
cable.
didn't hear the testimony,
He-
so I wasn't sure what we were trying to do here. So that's helpful, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, he has not dark, he has passive fiber that he has strung through half of his cable area.
Yes.
He's made a sizable investment in that on his own dime. He does not want to be excluded from being able to work with his CUD and have them contract with somebody else that we've included that will then come in, undercut him, and he's left holding a whole lot of expensive fiber he can't use or sell.
Got it.
So it's just including. I don't know if this will fix his problem, but it's not leaving him out is the intention. Senator McDonald.
Yeah, you've characterized it pretty much 100%. He has replaced his cable among half his customers with fiber, and seeks and is going forward to get the rest of the customers with fiber, and worries that we're going to subsidize the for-profit big guys to go in and cover the other half of his territory with public money at his expense. He would like to be able to compete for that.
I think that's pretty much what we're trying to give him. Okay,
Thank you. That's helpful, you guys.
so hopefully we've done that.
Well, so now we have to decide how to do that.
Yes.
And I think there are 2 issues related to some of the incumbent providers. There's the eligibility so that they can get the grants to continue to build out their networks. But there's also the issue that's addressed in the bill later on competitive overbuilds. I think that's another issue that they're concerned about, publicly financed projects in their areas. So I just wanted to flag that because I think some of these providers have that same issue, however you want to decide it
That-
ultimately.
Their competitor could come in with a grant and string fiber on the same line that they have.
Or in the same, yeah, on the same area to serve the same area.
And take customers. I think we did hear, I believe from Christine, that there's a certain number of customers per mile you have to make any business plan viable. That, and I think it was 3 per mile to do anything.
Higher.
And that's probably an average. You can get 10 per mile in a downtown, and that can offset it. But I think the 3 per mile was the number I remember.
I think it's
So,
higher than that, Madam Chair, but that we.
but to
can check
make
that.
to make it viable to string cable, it's 10 per mile. So if you don't have 10 people per mile to string the fiber out there, but I believe what she said, because she was talking about these are underserved for a reason. And that if you're down below 3 people a mile, it doesn't, and I think that's on average, it just won't work on any business plan because there's just not enough revenue to support the cost. This is a business. So I can see where the concern would be if we're going to require, it goes both ways. If the CUDs need to pick up some customers in downtown Montpelier in order to make it financially viable to run the fiber all the way out to Calais, they're going to want to be able to compete with Consolidated. On the other hand, Consolidated, they're not going to want Consolidated to be able to jump on their wire and then offer cheaper service because they've got a bigger base and undercut them in Calais. So we've got, how are we going to regulate, or can we even, competition? I don't want to touch it, but
I'm not convinced we can put it in a bill.
I'm not either.
But right now we just have to try to pin down how we define these little telecom or not telecoms, but
Well, I think we've taken a stab at it, and I'm pretty sure they'll tell us if we've
okay.
really messed up. If they've all got 100 employees, they need to tell us that. And
Well,
perhaps we can ask the department or Rob Fish if he
Madam
knows.
Chair?
them. Yes,
You can be a business and have no employees.
yes.
Because you subcontract. We might look at the number of connections served or servable. That's a kind of a finite number. So I don't,
Okay,
and ask someone smarter than us that what a good point would be to
yeah.
to choose.
And the 25 employees, that just came from the original Act 79 that created the VTA. There was a priority given to small providers as defined as those with fewer than 25 employees. No idea if that's, relevant today or how that would work, but
Yeah. And that, if you do FTEs, that wouldn't count if you hire a crew of 100 to run out, like all the guys that are out here stringing cable. They're a contract.
ValleyNet
But,
wouldn't count. Yeah.
well, ValleyNet, yeah,
Well, fewer than, it's fewer than, so ValleyNet would count.
it's, but three
Want to
other,
leave out Valley Net?
no,
I didn't think so.
no, but yeah, so if I can, you can be an organization with one individual in it and
Yeah.
subcontract everything. So the number of employees is not,
Okay, well, we
apples and
need to
oranges
find,
and plums.
we need to find something else then if it's not
So-
employees.
Well, how
Well, we've
about,
defined locations as the places reached with electricity that we wish to reach with broadband. So
I don't know that we know that either.
what's wrong with then no more than 3 counties? You operate in no more than 3 counties. What's wrong with that?
Okay, let's leave that as we've taken a stab at it, but no, I think, all right, let's leave it at 3 counties. And if we've messed somebody up, they'll come tell us. This bill has a long way to go. All right. And I don't
Good
think we've
plan.
changed underserved or underserved. We're set there. All right, this is the fund.
So now the next area, we're gonna talk about the authorized expenditures from the fund.
Yes.
So I think based on your conversations, definitely the 2 big grant programs, pre-construction and construction. Then for a number of these proposals that you heard in your committee, I think you were looking for some kind of a report back in January of next year by the board as to whether and to what extent these initiatives should be funded. So I did include that in the annual report,
Okay.
which we can look at and make sure everything is in there, as well as some additional things I think that you came up that you might want in that initial annual report. But things that I think you wanted to leave here, but possibly revise. One of them had to do with workforce, communications workforce.
I think what we
I'm not sure what
decided-
amount, but I think you were talking about
that one of the grant acceptable things to ask for a grant for, part of your grant could be to train or acquire, pay for, to access trained employees or to provide specialized training in order to fulfill the grant. That you might get a scholarship, give 3 folks a scholarship to VTC to get their certificate. But that what was it Sandra Kitchell was saying last night? $200 million in for workforce in the budget. And there's
No, I don't think it's that much.
not there's
But-
2 million in, I think, for telecom specifically. And then there was a much larger amount in for workforce training and development, which was, healthcare, nurses, everybody that we need. But there was some specifically earmarked funding for workforce. I know Senator Sirotkin would like to get as much money as he can, but
I thought we agreed yesterday that we weren't going to put a specific number in. We were just going to authorize
yeah, we've got
The power-
1.5.
the
We've got-
powers of the board to spend money on that, whether it's within the contract to the CEDs or separately contract for the same thing to make this whole process work.
Workforce development and training necessary to carry out the goals and purposes of this chapter.
Something like that, yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So in looking at, just to answer the question about workforce and looking at the sort of budget highlights that the Appropriations Committee provided, it looks like there's $23 million sort of generically under the umbrella of workforce investments. Senator Kitchell, I believe, told us yesterday that there was 2 million for apprenticeships.
Yeah.
There is 2 million for apprenticeship, and most of the rest goes to the Vermont State College system for coursework.
Well, the state college system is a separate, that's 53.2 million. So in the highlights of the budget, it's 23 million for workforce, higher education stabilization is 53 million, and then economic development is 57 million. Those are the three categories in their
But
highlight sheet.
in the workforce, most of the money that the appropriations put in was through the state college system.
Oh, okay.
Provide the training for the workforce.
Yeah, to take coursework, yeah.
Yeah.
And then $2 million for apprenticeship.
In terms of the language, I think that Senator Sorokin's idea is a good one, to sort of like an umbrella, that this is something that the board could spend the money on. I guess I would also just include language that's to something to the effect of, to the extent that it's not covered by another funding source, so that there's, you know, if there's other federal funding or other state funding or private funding that could go to it, that would be
This
set
is,
first before this.
I don't know if Senator Brock is with us, but
I'm here.
we talked about that this morning. You know, everybody's trying to put that language in and say, go someplace else. And so we're dealing with apprenticeship, trying to define the parameters of the apprenticeship program. And we're trying to say, you know, to the extent that it's, that workforce training is potentially covered by the broadband, for broadband kinds of employment, then use this apprenticeship money for other areas. So
I
It's-
think you're
chicken-
cocking
chicken and
yourself
egg
out
kind
of
of thing.
getting anything in this bill, Senator.
what's that?
I said, I think you're starting to talk yourself out of my support for putting money in this bill. This bill is
Well-
going primarily to get fiber on the poles, or to get CUDs ready to put fiber on the poles. In all of that ready can be part,
Who's gonna put the fiber up?
well, that's my next sentence. In part of that, there may be some workforce training.
Right. And
All
I'm
right.
not saying what amount, I'm just saying we have these powers later on in the bill, and I asked Maria to
That's
get some
where we're
language.
gonna put it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We did this for a long time yesterday. I think we need to move on.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I ask, didn't we do something around this very question in H3, what was it?
There's
3?
100,000 in there for a workforce survey. And I thought that was a lot of money for a survey. And so as Maria said, the rest of it was to go to set up an apprenticeship program.
Okay, all right. So are we settled that we just don't stipulate an amount, but we allow the board to invest in workforce if it deems necessary? Is that where we're trying to land?
Yes, I
That
thought
could-
that's where we had landed.
I agree. That's where we have landed.
Okay, then we'll
Maria,
move
it
on.
wouldn't go to the Department of Labor. As it's drafted right now, you have it going to the Department of Labor. I think it would be in consultation maybe with the Department of Labor.
This is not where this section would lie. I don't know what this 150,000 is for. This is for a
Yeah.
survey. I'm talking about actually supporting the workers and getting
Right.
them trained.
So
Okay,
there are a couple of places which you may or may not want to include. So it was in here as an expenditure to be consistent initially with H360 as passed the House, because they asked for the 100,000 for the survey and the apprenticeship program. So that would be an eligible expenditure from the fund. You could broaden it and allow for funding by the board in consultation with the department, and just not be any more prescriptive, except just kind of a general requirement, and to the extent there aren't funds available from other sources. There's also, I think Senator Sorokin, you specifically were looking at in terms of the board's duties. to promote workforce development, that would be part of its responsibilities. And there is language in here, which we'll get to, that does that. And then I'm hearing there's also the issue of somehow through the pre-construction grant program or the grant program, certainly in the grant program, you're going to get funding for your labor costs. I don't know that you're going to, at that point, be looking at training, maybe, I don't know. And the pre-construction grants are for planning, feasibility, make ready to the CUDs. I don't know to what extent.
And put workforce development and training in there.
So, I mean, you could work on in that program as a potential grant recipient for kind of the pre-construction costs, maybe for any provider to the extent they can upskill their, anyway, so I hope I
Yeah,
haven't.
I was looking at it less a contract with the Department of Labor, because I think they've got their hands full at the moment. I was looking more for individual providers to come in and say, and as part of our buildup, I was thinking of the Nulties, that we need to train 3 guys and, and put them in this apprenticeship program, so that one of the part of your grant could be to help you develop your workforce.
Madam Chair,
But-
my feeling about this is I don't feel equipped to get that granular at this point. I would just want enabling legislation to let these experts figure out how best to address the challenge of workforce. I mean, we heard in our committee, for instance, from the building trades that they have apprenticeship programs that could help with this, but they need money to get staffing for that. So that may be an area where potentially this board, after doing some due diligence, could make the decision. I don't feel that we should be making exactly how they should spend the money or if they should spend any money. I just want to give them, if they see a problem and they want to address it and they have $100 million, they might want to put $250,000 towards this issue in some form yet to be determined. But I don't think we should get so granular to tell them how they should do workforce training.
No, I'm not trying to tell them how. I'm just trying to figure out how we get it in here. So we are right now under acceptable uses for the fund, right?
Yes.
I thought we were under communications carriers, but I guess we've solved that. And, all right. And we took out the Department of Library. And I mean, part of it is towns are getting a slug of money. Towns might want to upgrade their libraries. Department of Ed might want to upgrade their schools. If we say we're going to do it for them, they won't do it. I would think that a CUD could come in and request the funding as part of their build out plan to wire up their local housing project.
So I think that the difference, Madam Chair, is that for both the libraries and the housing program is that they're looking for equipment that's internal to the library, that's internal to the building, the housing, not to wires to those things. That's part of a sort of internal system. And I was just hoping that we could get language that allows this, that's a may, and to the extent that other funds are not available language. That's what I was thinking for all of this, is that we give them options for what they can spend the money on above and beyond the grant programs, and we put that as mays.
Okay, I just think given the feeding frenzy we've seen across the board with the money available, that the minute we start saying we've already got 3 million, that's been requested and another. And in the end, we're not gonna, this year, the primary focus is getting fiber out so that the senior housing in downtown Plainfield next year might want to come in for a grant. But this year we need to get the fiber out.
Okay, I'm
And
fine. I will give on that as long as we can put it in the report that they actually report back on whether or not this
Well,
kind of thing is possible.
We can ask them to. Again, I'm a little sensitive coming out of health and welfare where we get so many reports that nobody can read them all. And that it takes a lot of time to write reports.
Oh, this is just part of
And-
their annual report. I think
Right,
later. in
but
the-
it takes investigation. I mean, that's the time. You have to investigate. You have to take testimony from all of these places. You have to, we start diluting the focus and trying to be everything to everyone. And I would rather we get the focus down and then we can decide if we've got any place to start diluting, because these won't be the last places. And these are by
Okay,
and
that's
large
fine.
in currently served areas.
I'm fine as long as if we can move on, I'm fine.
Okay. So we've taken those out, but I was thinking that this might be the place to put funding for the department.
Okay.
If, I don't know, one of the eligible expenses is they're gonna need administrative staff, they're gonna need the ability to have a lawyer. And I think they'll need that. We may need to give them some assistance this year, depending on what we ask them to do in the next 9 months.
I think they're already in there.
So this,
Somewhere.
I
10
kind of
and 11.
collapsed 10 and 11 together. And so, and I put a figure. I don't know if this is appropriate.
Okay, it's the
but-
board and the department, all
Yep,
right,
so up to 1.5 million to
okay,
fund the operational expenses of the board. And also, whoops, the department, to the extent the department's expenses are not reimbursable under its annual budget funded by the gross receipts tax. So you'll see the earlier language said the administrative expenses of the department. And I think Commissioner
Well,
Tierney
there's-
was saying we might have lawyers. So I expanded it so that this money is for operational expenses, which would include staff as well as administrative expenses.
we'll leave
but
this
try-
on and because we haven't fleshed out what we want the department to do this year. And I think we need to adequately resource them once the board is up and running. Maybe that resource could slide over to the board, but if we want to they're going to be getting the grants out this year. And I think we need to make sure they're adequately resourced to do that. So.
Well, these are two separate questions though, aren't they, Madam
Yes.
Chair? One is what money supports the board in this operation, which is what we're
Yep.
looking at here. Another is what are we doing between now and December or January?
December, yeah.
So does this make sense? Up
This-
to 1.5?
This makes sense. I'll wait and see if the email, and if I ever can get off of my 3 screens here. If Faith has it, she can send it. I don't remember. She's usually CC'd. But the commissioner wanted language that said she was authorized to hire up to. So she may feel she needs something a little more specific than this.
Okay.
But that's a good placeholder.
Okay, and there is another section that deals with the department's support. So I might be able to include Commissioner Tierney's language there. So it's,
Okay.
she has this, has the authority to hire the staff as well as be reimbursed which is
Okay.
what this section deals with.
All right.
Okay,
We've got our intent. I don't know if we've got our words, but
Maybe a little more work there, but so then moving on to the board, I think you settled on a 3-member board.
yep.
So no longer have the Commissioner of Public Service or the Secretary of ACCD. And so now it's 3 public members, 1 appointed by the governor, who shall have expertise in the area of finance, 1 appointed by the speaker, not a legislator, who shall have expertise in the area of broadband deployment in rural high-cost areas, and 1 member appointed by the Senate, who shall have expertise in the area of communications and electric utility law and policy.
What we said. Maria, we need to also put in, we didn't do a term. Everybody else has 3 years. I think we're agreed that their term is 3 years. And we also discussed removal only for cause.
yeah. Good.
Yes, I did add that. You'll
Okay,
see there on line 10.
Oh,
Member
nice.
may be removed for cause only. Let's see, in terms of the terms and staggered terms, I thought
it's
that
great.
was in here.
no, we got them, it's 3, we're
Uh,
not doing, well,
It's got to be cleaned up because this is about the initial
Yes,
5 people, but you're
right. Yep. Okay, let me, I'll adjust that language
we-
there. Yeah.
Do we want do we want to articulate who the chair is?
that was the other thing. We hadn't, usually the other proposals were that the chair is elected by the board.
It's tricky with
Which-
three people.
It is tricky with 3. We can do,
I
we
think
can go out to 5.
no, I'd rather just give the chair to probably the governor, but
Right.
That's my inclination as well.
Yeah. Same here. Someone's got to be in the hot seat for calling meetings, organizing agendas.
So instead of the
And-
board electing from among its members, the chair and vice chair, the governor's appointment shall serve as the chair.
That works.
Yeah. You can name chair, vice chair, and ranking member in the bill. Right?
No.
Who's the secretary? And the clerk. Okay. I
Okay,
think, yeah, we want to we don't want them to have a whole meeting just to choose which one of the 3 of them is going to be in charge. I mean,
Okay.
we need to get this thing up and running.
so maybe
All right.
not have the electing officers or, okay.
Did we talk
So-
about vice Senate at all on these appointments?
Talk about the vice chair.
No, advice and consent of the Senate on these appointments.
Oh. We didn't.
I usually don't like that stuff, but on this particular one, I think
Yeah.
it's so new and it's so important. I think we might want to,
that would only be for the chair because we can't consent to the house's appointment.
okay.
Chair and probably the CEO.
Yes, for both.
Okay, but they can start running without our advice and consent, as we know. All right.
Okay, so you want the board member appointment to be by vice and consent of
The
the Senate
chair
and
and the
chair.
CEO would be with the advice and consent of the Senate.
the executive director. Okay,
We wouldn't be able to consent on their appointment until next spring.
That's true.
Well, no, we could do it the first thing in January, but that's just, I can remember approving Shumlin appointments after Governor Scott was in, we were doing Scott and Shumlin appointments at the same time because they'd been serving for 9 months and they continued to serve. It's not a perfect system, but at least if somebody totally inappropriate is appointed, it gives us an opportunity to have a temper tantrum in public.
That's it.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real power in it, but it gives us a chance to at least have a vote of non-confidence. And on something this like publicly watched, I think that would have some clout. All right. And you have the 3 years. All right, good for
So-
cause.
I'll make some other changes there. The other issue that came up, Senator Pearson had raised, the language that's highlighted on your screen now, 2 members may discuss or deliberate the business of the board outside an open meeting consistent with. And then you'll see that statutory reference. These are
that legal?
basically, well, yep, this is a carve out in the open meeting law that says what a meeting is not. So what does not trigger an open meeting? And I'm just going to try to pull it up now so that you can.
Okay, they can discuss, but they can't.
They can't do
Because with
official
3
business.
members on the board, 2 people are a quorum, which means member A can't cover up member B and say, you know, I've got this legal concern. What do you think? Decisions. It's
Is this how
It's a-
we, is this how we handle it for the PUC, Maria?
I'm not sure. So this was a recommendation that I just got before coming onto this meeting from Tucker Anderson. And so in terms of what the types of meetings that or conversations that they would be allowed to have, it would mean a communication, including in person or through email, telephone, teleconferencing between members of a public body for the purpose of scheduling, organizing, distributing materials, provided that no other business of the public body is discussed or conducted. Such communication that results in written or recorded information shall be available for inspection and copying under the Public Records Act. They could meet at social gatherings, conventions, conferences, training programs, etc., provided that they do not discuss specific business of the public body. So I can, maybe the easiest thing for me to do would be to send this to Faith to post, or actually I might be able to pull it up now.
I could offer an alternative. If people are comfortable with this basic and we're going to ask GovOps to look at it, then maybe that's enough for our needs right at this moment.
It is an issue because I can talk to you in the hall and say, how are you feeling about 360? And you can say to me, I have a concern about this line or this paragraph, and we can talk. And we're not a quorum and we aren't making any decisions because 2 of us aren't a majority. But if there's only 3 people, that means any 2 people talking is a quorum. And so anything you say, it can be seen as a decision. And that's pretty limiting. It gets us around. I can remember warning a city council picnic because we might talk about something, but the whole council was going to be there.
Botulism.
So it's the backside of a 3-person board. So Senator Hardy.
Madam Chair, it sounds like though Maria has sort of tried to take care of that with this language suggested by Tucker and allow, because there's a carve out.
Yeah, but what she read us said they can meet at social gatherings, they can talk for scheduling but they can't talk about issues.
How does the
So
Public Service
here,
Commission work with respect to this?
I'm
I
sorry.
didn't catch that, Senator.
I was saying, how does the Public Service Board or the Public Utilities Commission work as far as this goes?
I would have to look.
I would think that they would
Um,
have the same kind of problem, in fact, even more so as a quasi judicial organization.
Well, I could talk to the attorney and you could talk to the attorney, and we weren't talking together.
And it may be that this carve out that I've just pulled up now already applies to the open meeting law. And I would just need to confirm that with Tucker so that, what you'll see here about, what does not constitute a meeting that requires an open meeting is delineated in statute. So, but I can confirm that. But anyway, I just wanted you to see in context, these are the definitions of meetings under the open meetings law, and B, C, and D define what does not constitute a meeting. So let me see if I can loop Tucker in a little bit more.
Yeah, see if
I
he can
think-
help us and see what the PUC does.
Okay.
I mean, if bad comes to worse, we put 5 members on the board and find other people. One appointed by us and one appointed by the House Committee. I mean,
I guess we could just appoint 3 people who don't like each other.
that's true. Okay, but
Okay.
that, we need to flag that as an issue because we
Okay.
you do need to. I don't know.
Can we
We'll
flag
see.
it as an issue for GovOps to solve
Yeah.
for us?
Yeah,
They'll
we
have
can
some,
send that over to GovOps. All right. They don't have anything to do.
Okay.
some of the
All right.
PUC stuff's about ex parte communications. It's not, I haven't seen anything about how they talk to each other. But
I think that I know there was a concern about city council members texting each other during meetings. And that's a no-no.
it would be,
Uh,
it'd be perverse if we had to go to 5 members just to satisfy
It would.
the
It
open meeting
would, but
law.
or we may just need to live with the law as it is. And
Or get an exemption.
I don't think I want to go there.
And I'll ask Tucker
Okay.
again to kind of
Yeah,
really look at this and
tell him-
understand better what's the current
Well,
practice.
Yeah,
and-
I mean, most select boards only have, or they all have 5 now. I thought there's towns with only 3 select boards.
Yeah.
And I've heard that town business used to be done from the back of a tractor. I
We-
Yeah, we're
don't
not
know
tractors
that you
anymore.
can do that anymore.
There has to be something in the PUC, which is 3 members, that could guide us here.
I can look at that too.
Okay, let's keep moving.
So in terms of the compensation or stipend for the board members, I think you agreed on $250
We did.
per diem and reasonable expenses. Then in terms of the board's powers, I think you maybe wanted to be just a little bit more explicit that the board, which has broad powers, can delegate any of those powers to the executive director.
There is
Except for
boilerplate
grant
for that.
approval.
I guess we did decide that Senator Pearson,
Well, I think that's good, but we need to keep out grant approval. That's not something they can hand over.
right.
So
So,
maybe that's
yeah.
already handled. but-
Board has the board has the exclusive responsibility to approve all grants of money.
Yeah, and the
That
plan,
cannot be delegated.
Oh, shoot.
And most of those will involve contracts and partnerships, and which then gets into when you're dealing with contracts, don't you go into executive session for that?
Only if the board is contracted, and it
well,
would endanger your bargaining position.
if they're reviewing contracts of
Oh, the
grants,
board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe you can.
but that's handled elsewhere. But
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to
Trying to make sure that the board is the one, that the work is done by the executive director and the employees to help the CUDs and others get their contracts, get everything ready for approval. And then there's this separate board that does the approving and or denying, or
Just to
perhaps
be,
amending.
yeah, so just to be clear, this structure of the board that has all of the authority and then executive director, that's the administrative officer, that was basically the model of the VTA. So the executive director is really the chief executive officer, or carrying out all of these responsibilities. So I wonder if trying to delegate maybe there's a way of doing it that doesn't
There's gotta be
add
boilerplate
well,
somewhere.
this may work, in trying to say they could delegate some of their powers. It raised the issue that Senator Pearson just mentioned about, well, that doesn't mean that they can approve grants. That doesn't mean that, or the executive director can set the budget. So I don't know that the language as it is doesn't already do what you expect to do. Maybe under the executive director section, a little more clarity there about the ED's authority, which we'll get to next. And maybe there's a way of saying that more explicitly.
Yeah, because the ED does not work at the pleasure of the board. The ED is appointed by the governor.
Appointed by the governor, and then I think you wanted to add with the advice and consent of the Senate.
Yeah.
So in terms of the board's authorities, I think you wanted to strike the provision that allowed the board to enter into contracts and apply for grants on behalf of or jointly with a CUD.
Yeah, we didn't know we had trouble envisioning what that would be like.
Right, and I did add another provision. Let's see. That had to do under the pre-construction, maybe it was under the pre-construction program. Oh, I haven't gotten there yet. That the board can assist CUDs with applying for grants that are available from other sources, not this chapter. So if there are other funding opportunities and there's assistance needed with respect to grant writing or things, or applying for financing, that we just haven't gotten to that section yet.
Yeah, okay.
So these tasks like D that we can see there, facilitate partnerships and their potential partners, that seems, it seems like the work to me of an executive director, and a board will be consulting and advising on that kind of stuff. It's a different, this board seems here to be much more hands-on and much more daily than I thought where we left off.
This is consistent from yesterday, but remember that we're sort of giving the board the charge, but anticipating it to be carried out by the executive director.
Usually the board hires the executive director to do what they tell the executive director to do.
Baxter.
Because the board is not hiring in this case. But almost every board is set up like this. There's got to be a boilerplate phrase that says, this is what the board is charged with doing. But doing it, the bulk of the doing it is done by the executive director.
And
I mean,
that's what this model does. That is the boilerplate that's used
Okay.
here. This is what the VTA model is. This is what other boards. So I guess I'm not sure on if, unless you want the
Okay.
board to be an advisory board and not be vested
No.
with the authority.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think this is standard language and this is not changed from our discussions yesterday.
no,
And
it
at
has
the
not.
Top of page 10, the executive director shall direct and supervise the board's administrative affairs and technical activities in accordance with board policies, in addition to any other duties necessary for carrying out the purposes of this chapter. And those are the duties of the executive director. So that is basically saying the executive director does all the work.
Okay.
But the board, legally has the authority, but the director is actually doing the stuff. And that's pretty standard.
So we've got that covered. So what haven't we covered?
Can we go back? I'd like to comment on G. I think E is fine. Although
What page?
hold on, E, we're looking at it on the screen.
Okay.
E,
here.
the
Yeah.
new language of E, those are pretty far afield. I wonder if they should be broken. Develop policies or recommendations, recommend to the General Assembly programs that promote a strong workforce in Vermont, as well as access to affordable broadband service. Those are like
No, I know.
totally
That was
separate.
Very broad.
that was
Just
so I
have-
didn't have to re-letter, but I think you're right that I was just running out of time. So
Sure.
probably should be separate.
We're a demanding lot. I think those should be 2 letters, and then in what is currently G, I'm not interested about modification of taxes and fees applicable to broadband providers. I think what we should say here is something like consult and coordinate it with any agency in state government to assist their work. I mean, this is a high priority, right, for the next several years for the whole state. And so we want to make sure it's clear that they have access to whomever they can think of. So I don't know if others agree, but I mean, taxes, and I think that's kind of inherent. If they think of some major hurdle that taxes and fees are creating, they could talk to us about that. But really, I want to make sure we're spelling out that they have broad access to expertise with state government.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, did this come from the discussion from the electric co-ops and
Yes.
the,
This language was actually in the VTA's powers as something to look at, and certainly the issue of taxes and fees applicable to broadband providers, whether it's the property tax issue, has come up. So it's carried over. It was in the House language. So
I think that's 3 or 4 years down the road. I mean, if
Yeah.
it comes up that right now we got municipalities which aren't taxable. We can't tax we've got federal limits on what we can tax. We're dealing with the property tax issue here. I just don't know Yeah, he didn't like being deprived of his nap.
Yeah, he's attacking. It's a love attack.
I think I think we can take that out for now. If the board comes back and says, if we put a whole coverall, anything else that is necessary to, that covers, nothing says they can't look at taxes
Right.
Right.
And the
or fees.
So you're saying just strike G altogether?
Strike G, put in yeah, just anything else that they feel is necessary to promote the goals of this chapter.
That's already there under J.
Okay, so it's covered.
Yeah, I agree with striking G. I think it's not necessary. And then that will mean you don't have to re-letter, Maria. Then you can
That's,
use that
and
letter.
I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
There are limits, right?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'll go
Madam-
back and fix all of
Madam
that.
Chair. Madam Chair,
Oh, yeah, Senator Sorokin.
I want to go back to E for a second. This language, Maria drafted this at my request. I just want to ask the question, do folks feel that if an opportunity came to the board to fund an apprenticeship program out of the $100 million, that this would allow the board to do that? Or do we have to say, develop and give them enabling authority to develop and effectuate policies? If people feel that the intent here is to allow the board to spend money on these policies, then I'm fine with it, but I'm a little concerned that that may not be.
Senator, I'm getting a little, we're going to be back here before this board ever gets up and operating. By next January, hopefully we'll have a better idea about the workforce needs, and then we can alter this. But we have spent as much time talking about wording for workforce, which we don't know anything right now about how much of a problem it is. Once people can move and go back to work, it may not be the problem it was last year in the middle of a pandemic. I think we just say that it's acceptable and let it play out. But I don't think this is the place that we should be thinking about funding major apprenticeship programs. That's not the purpose of this bill. I think there's workforce development
Again,
bills,
Madam
and that's
Chair,
where it should go.
I am not saying that. I'm just saying, is the authority there? I'm not making the decision. In case they identify it as a problem, are we giving them the authority to spend the money? That's
No,
all I'm saying.
no, this does not. It says recommend to the General Assembly.
No,
But we did that in the fund section, I thought, Maria.
That's right. You had a provision and you did not specify an amount. Yep, in subdivision 8, that this is an authorized expenditure, funding in consultation with the Department of Labor for communications, workforce training and development to the extent funds are not available from other funding sources.
Where is that?
Again,
There.
so this is under, it should be on your screen now, subdivision 8. This is under authorized expenditures from the fund.
On page 5, Michael.
Oh,
if you have
sorry.
The paper version.
Rid of that. That was for the survey, right?
No,
Oh, the
Well,
survey
you
was 315.
She took that out and made it broader to
Is
make
there a
it
ty-
just workforce.
is there a typo there? To fund to the extent what? To fund what?
I think there was a typo. So I've I'm now working from language that I've just edited here online. So the change, so if you're looking at the earlier draft, it struck the $100,000 and had, XXX is appropriated, whatever. So under the most recent version that I thought was consistent with what the committee asked for, it now just reads as an eligible expenditure funding in consultation with the Department of Labor for communications workforce training and development to the extent such funds are not available from any other funding source.
All right. And we move on to page 10.
Can I just ask one quick question? I know you want to move on. So administrative expenses this is for in subdivision 9, just below that, an eligible expenditure. This is the administrative expenses of grant recipients. So often they're allowed up to a certain percentage of the grant award to pay for their own administrative costs. So the question was, under the initial proposal, it's the board sets the amount that's allowed to be used. I didn't know, I thought there was some conversation about maybe setting a cap. So not to exceed 2%, 5%, 10%. It may vary greatly depending on the nature of the grant.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a question. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to fill in there. I just have an X right now, not to exceed X%.
What do you give a charity?
I think that, Maria has in there the language of subject to applicable federal law and guidance. And I think that probably should cover it, because that will ultimately be granting federal funding to these entities. And there are federal requirements for the percent that's allowable for administrative expenses. So I think that covers it, unless we want to sort of put our own percentage in there, but
Too hard to know for me.
And any percent that we put in would be arbitrary at this point.
right. So I think just leaving it as subject to federal is
Okay.
probably safe.
Depends on what they've got to hire. I mean, if they've got to hire a utilities lawyer, that's going to be costly. We don't know. So we can always refine this. All right.
So we're on page
Okay.
10.
So we're
Back
now
on 10.
On page 10. Okay. So now we're looking at the executive director. I think Senator Hardy already read the nature of that position, and it's his or her duties. I don't think you made changes to the authority of the executive director to retain or employ experts.
Yeah, where is that?
or-
Where is
So
fire?
under the draft online, it's on the bottom of page 10, and it's subdivision 2.
Oh,
The
okay.
executive director may retain or employ technical experts and other officers, agents, employees, and contractors as are necessary to give effect to the purposes of this chapter, including in the areas of finance, network planning, engineering, technical design, and grant writing, and may fix their qualifications, duties, and compensation. So
Okay.
Is that,
That makes sense to me. And that's the executive director. I wonder, going up a little bit, if we should, I mean, it's so obvious that maybe it's silly, but our A is the mandate that the director attend all meetings. A little more interesting to me would be to say something like, work with the board to realize the purpose, or, to help build out broadband. Like, don't we want to make it really clear that this is kind of the person working under the board to carry this out? Do people think that's necessary?
this sounds to me a little more, it sounds demeaning you have to attend all meetings. You have to act as the secretary and keep the minutes of the proceeding.
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
that's what you do to the secretary. And we all know everybody volunteers to be the secretary.
So what about something like work with the board to realize Vermont's broadband goals or something? I mean, make it really clear that this is your job.
Is to carry out, the primary job is to carry out the goals of the board and this statute or this. That's your primary job. I was wondering if under this, you can hire and fire and pay everybody, but wouldn't that be subject to the approval of the board or not?
Mhm.
The budget is approved by the board, I would assume. But
And executing or implementing good. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm just looking for checks and balances. You couldn't give your brother-in-law a $500,000 job.
Very good.
So I think the administrative bulletins 3.5 and 5 probably include, those are the policies that the Secretary of Administration adopts for all state contracts for services and goods or for grants. So not that familiar with each of them, but I suspect in there is where you have an open and competitive process, the accounting and any conflict provisions. I would have to confirm that, but I think that's where you might capture the giving a contract to your cousin scenario.
And before we get off of this, I believe that there are requirements for the publishing of meetings. Is there under open meeting? I know there's been a lot of complaints about select boards that don't get their minutes posted within 3 days. And so we probably should put cause to be taken and posted in accordance with law, or
I think that's all part of
Yeah, I
open
think they'd be
records and
right. I think they'd be
Open
subject to the open meeting law
yeah, I'm
and
sure
the
they,
Public
yeah.
Records Act. But if you want to be explicit, you certainly can.
Well, we took out, he had to take the minutes, but I think we want to be clear.
We do actually want him to take the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we want minutes. You can do it on a
Okay.
recording and type it up.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
if you're
I
hiring,
think it's inherent.
yeah, all right.
wait, so
That's
Chris, are
just
you-
aware of our audience.
Are we-
Let me just mute myself. I've really noisy dogs.
There's a deer in the front yard.
What it is.
Okay,
are we
so I
taking
think it's
out-
our intent, that these meetings be conducted in accordance with the open meeting law. And I believe that does require that minutes are taken and posted, but we're not. That would be under the general responsibility, which it is now, of chair of the select board or whoever the executive authority is to get that done. But that's, and ultimately it's the responsibility of the board to see that it's done. Okay.
So you do want that articulated though, Madam Chair. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it, I don't think it hurts, but if it's just generally assumed that if we say they have to operate in accordance with open meeting, it's up to, as long as it's covered.
I think it's already the law, so it's fine to just articulate it.
Yeah, all right.
Could I ask Maria, we make it clear that the executive director is part of the classified service created in 3 VSA Chapter 13. Have we figured out how much we're paying this person or what level of, I mean, they need to be a pretty high level state employee, right? In order for us to attract the talent that we're
Well,
thinking.
probably. And you actually don't specify that the ED is part of the classified service. In general, managerial positions are exempt positions. So presumably the ED would be an exempt position, but you haven't set the compensation. So that would be up to the governor upon
Compensation.
the advice and consent of the Senate. But if you want to.
So
you
if we're
can.
silent about it, it lands with the governor.
Yeah.
I believe so, because he's doing the hiring.
as long
Okay.
as It's within the budget.
I think that's terrific.
Okay.
Okay. So, let's see, the administration.
That's the $1 million grant.
It's going to cover the administrative and operational expenses. So we'll hear, I'm sure, from the department about whether.
And what is the timing on that? Because we don't want to give it away on passage and find out that the department means to use it in August, right?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah,
The timing
Fine,
of
it-
the timing of the grant little d there.
Oh, okay. So they've been awarded the grant already. This is a grant that Northern Border Regional Commission has given a $1 million grant to the department to specifically to support CUDs. So they have that grant. I don't know that they have the money in their account now. So I guess if that's your question, if they plan on paying
Well,
for
No,
I
that's
that I
not
don't
my
know.
question. My
Oh,
question
sorry.
is, I don't want this grant and the position to shift over to the board before we have the board and then leave the department in a weird zone between now and January. So
Okay.
that's
They are
the-
planning to using this person because the
Right.
CUDs need the help now.
right. That's
So I'd
exactly.
say upon its act, yeah.
Okay. So we can add that, upon the
Activation of the
Um,
board.
after the initial organizational
Yeah.
meeting at that point.
Yeah, good. That way, if it's delayed or whatever. All right, thank you.
Sure. So then the next change that I made shows up here is stricken, and this is the statutory section on grant eligibility. And the proposal is not to strike this as a requirement, which is that any proposed project must be part of a universal service plan, but rather to put that language more explicitly under the construction grant program and the pre-construction grant program. So this was not intended to be a substantive change, with the exception of the one thing I think that you did talk about, and I wasn't certain whether you wanted to do this, but that second sentence, the board may award a grant to a project that does not fully implement a universal service plan if the board finds. I think, I'm not sure, but I think the committee was thinking about striking that exception and just leave it as the project must be part of a universal service plan. So, and if you want, we can go back and look at the definition of universal service plan.
This language to me, when I spoke with Maria this morning, it seemed problematic to me because it seemed to open up the door for the possibility that we would be giving, or this board would be giving out grants for projects that are not universal. And I wasn't comfortable with that language, and it seemed to me it was counter to what we were trying to do.
But there's two ways at that, though. None of these grants are going to be to provide universal service. We just don't have that much money. So you're going to be doing grants that are part of a universal service plan, or we've got all those tails we were talking about yesterday.
Right, and
So-
that's where Maria added that language below. You can see in paragraph A.
Part of a university. Good.
Yeah. So it's more clear that it would be a phased approach potentially, or might do town by town or district by district or something. That we wouldn't be awarding grants that say, well, I'm only going to do 80% of this part of.
No, the intent is it's part of a plan to do the whole area. But it's not, they're going to do this in phase stages. And they may not even have a plan on how to do what's happening 10 years down the road.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so you saw the language in the pre-construction program and the construction grant program, part of a universal service plan. What I wasn't sure if you had made a decision for pre-construction grants, the House had proposed allowing the department to allocate up to $9 million for grants prior to September 30th of this year. I wasn't sure if you wanted to leave that as is.
Did the House have construction grants as well for this year?
They had the existing connectivity initiative, which is the existing broadband grant program, which does have some money from the Universal Service Fund. I think it's about $1 million. I'm not certain. So there are some proposed amendments to that program. The department is still allowed to go forward administering grants under that program until January of next year, at which point that program would be under the administration of this new board. So,
But they didn't put in new money? I'm sorry, maybe I missed.
no, sorry. They didn't add additional money for construction grants.
I think we need to. I think we've got a couple that are ready to go.
That's a bit of a mystery to me, to be honest. We hear that maybe little parts of it are ready to go. I don't fully know that, but how much is in the current fund do you have any sense, Maria?
I think the current fund is about $1 million, and I'll confirm that with Clay. I think part of what might have went into that thinking of the House is that their grants were for CUDs only. And that there aren't that many CUDs that are ready to begin construction right now. There are definitely those that would like to take advantage of pre-construction grants immediately. So maybe, I'm sure they could articulate better than I can, but that might have been some of the thinking about why the construction grant.
Yeah, I think be a little looser. I could see Waitsfield Champlain might, since they own the poles and they know the poles, they might be ready to string some fiber this fall. I'm not sure that Washington Electric might not be ready to string some fiber this fall with CV. I don't know that, but I don't want to tell them we've only got $1 million when we're sitting on 100 million. And I'd like to find a way to get everything that's ready to be strung.
The I agree with that, Madam Chair. I will say Washington Electric, the whole premise there is they're borrowing the money. So,
Right.
but, and I haven't verified this. My understanding for them to borrow money is it has to be themselves under their borrowing conditions.
Yes.
Universal, right? And
Right.
so if Central Vermont builds a little bit, that is guaranteed to be in Washington Electric's territory. And I just don't understand the interplay there. So I think we want to kind of name that, and I agree with you, some flexibility to build now if we can, but mostly it's probably this pre-build work that the CUDs will engage in. I will say that after our conversation yesterday, I was contacted, and one notion that Senator Bray's been talking about, and we've all kind of been bouncing around, is this concept of standards and interoperability. And I guess I don't understand if this would cause a delay, which would concern me, but should we consider that the board creates a standard for all the CUDs, as opposed to looking at the CUDs as standards, but just sort of says, we've got, because this is, as I understand it, there's not a ton of options, but we kind of have to pick one.
Right.
And
Well,
maybe
it's
before we're
this-
spending a lot of money on CUD grants,
Yeah.
should we sort of basically say, your CUD, here's the standard you're using?
We have to, but that standard could change in 2 years. It says they have to be interoperable and produce reliability and backup. I mean, I thought
Well,
we covered
We're
it.
not far off, but just sort of say the board shall dictate the standard. I don't know.
All right. I mean, I'm not even sure there is a standard. So Senator Bray, maybe you know.
Well, I think there's a joke in computing. Computing loves standards. That's why there are so many of them. But I think in this case, I think I would use the word adopt the standard. There are engineering organizations and standards out there, and I don't pretend to know what is right, but I would think adopting a standard would go a long way towards guaranteeing the long-term health of the whole network. I'm guessing the department, I'm sure there's just engineers around who know this one, because that's my understanding is that the grid and distribution systems work on a standard.
Yeah, they have to have that.
Otherwise, you get, Westinghouse versus Edison.
Yeah, I think other
Imagining-
than, go ahead, Senator Brock.
I was just saying, I'm imagining the adoption of the railroads in the US, in which different track gauges were used, and when one attempted to connect to another, it didn't. That notion of having adopted some common, and perhaps the words commonly accepted or industry accepted or something like that, standards, and after consultation with the CUDs, I think is important to put in as well. In other words, that they don't adopt them out of the blue without talking to the people who would be affected by them.
Right. I think, I sort of have my fingers crossed that no one has already made a substantial commitment to a technology that's not going to become the adopted technology. But the sooner we get there, the better, so that we don't end up with different gauge rails in different parts of the state. Equivalent. I did send Maria, Ms. Royal, some language on that future-proof phrase. Did you see that? I can go back and find the email. I just sent it while we've been here this morning.
You're muted, Maria.
Sorry, my dogs are still barking. I do have that, Senator Bray, so I will add your language.
Yeah, kept
A committee, I can't get rid of the chat now.
I think we're getting there.
There we go. Yeah, okay. I'm good. I'm getting messages about our next witness is coming in. Rebecca Smirnoff wanted to talk to us about the taxing things in some executive clarity. I've asked Faith to move her back to 1:30, but I'm going to try and get you a 45-minute lunch break, which means now. Are we kind of,
Well, we're close, Madam Chair. I'd like to give you.
okay, let's get it. Let's get this last one done and then we'll do lunch until 1:30.
So I think we're there. We just said the board will adopt industry accepted engineering standards that promote network reliability, blah, blah, blah. I think that's good. There is this issue. We haven't talked about it much and you're going to be frustrated, but here we go. Velco and Green Mountain Power,
Yep.
at least, but particularly Velco, which is sort of public, sort of owned by all the utilities, has a boatload of so-called dark fiber and even some active fiber. And there is a need, what I think I trust the people that tell me, we've got to be able to try and loop them in. And doing so means we go faster, means we do it cheaper. And I mean, this does not stretch the imagination. Now they have strung that fiber to a standard. So
Okay.
I don't know how you say to Velco, you shall, because they are not quite public. Maybe you link the PUC, but therein, I think we have to try and do this. We have to drive the board to attempt to coordinate. Obviously, Velco would get, this would be a lease arrangement, I should think. Some have suggested that we just have the CUDs build it and Velco gets to run it. You know, I don't know. There's a lot of options.
Yep.
But we should, at a minimum, you said CUD, input to the standards. Velco's input to the standards, I think, is important. And some attempt to link into that system that's all throughout the state. We will be so much happier if we do that. I'm thoroughly convinced.
I agree with you entirely. I think it's really important that we look at doing that. In particular, in fact, indeed, look at whether or not the wire carriers should be the ones to actually move and transmit the fiber and to have that connection, because we're not going to do it by decreeing it from here. To have that connection between the CUDs in particular and the major power providers on the other, to convene that connection quickly, I think is really important.
Okay, so I'm looking for wording. Senator Bray.
So I think it's a great idea to bring in, to the degree possible, this resource. I think they may have like 700 miles of fiber, and they're talking about building more. It's all part of a smarter grid that can respond to a distributed generation and a much more information-rich grid. So the only question I have is, I would just want to hear more from them before we start saying too much about them. Their use of that fiber might be quite different than the kind of use that it would be for, providing communications for an entire town. It may be very narrow. Anyway, so I'm thinking it's a good idea. I'm just a little concerned that we not outdrive our headlamps on how we bring them in, commit them.
Well,
Carrick has been in committee to talk about.
I'd love to learn that we could commit them. I'm not convinced we
Yeah.
can, but to the extent possible, the board shall blah, blah, blah. I mean,
Right,
maybe that's
Work
it.
to ensure,
right.
We've
Well,
heard
you-
that
yeah.
we've heard Greenmount Power has
Right.
similar assets. I mean, we don't want to string it right next to, I mean, this is
Right, right.
where,
Right.
It's crazy to do this twice if we don't have to.
Right.
There's,
Promote cooperation, whatever.
or
All different stuff.
efficiency and
More than that, I would
distribution.
say place a priority on connecting the two so that there can be the discussions toward resolving this. This should be a priority activity of the board if that's the case. And I hate to even wait for the board, but I don't know that there's anybody else standing there to be able to do that in the interim.
We might be able to hear from, well, I'm pretty sure Carrick Johnson mentioned fiber while he was in talking to us, at least on one of his visits. We might be able to get, a 10-minute visit with him and
Yep.
sort it out a little bit.
If we put this in, because this has got to get voted tomorrow, guys. If we put this in, committee of conference can take testimony from Carrick
Okay.
or anybody else. I mean,
Sure.
we don't,
I'm agreeing.
have
I'm just
time.
wondering how it works.
I think we don't know. Sandra Hardy.
yeah, I was just wondering for Maria's sake where you're, or my own actually, where you're suggesting putting this language about this. There is some language already that she included in the report, in the annual report that's related to Velco and dark fiber, but it sounds like you're wanting language that's sooner than that and more aggressive than that. So are you looking at putting it in the section 8087, which is the centralized resources for CUDs, or some other place?
Yeah, let's look.
yeah, it could fit in. I think it's 8088, centralized resources. Board shall
Interagency.
provide centralized resources and technical administration. You could say something, the board shall, it says assist communication union districts with completing grant and loan applications. I don't exactly know. I just,
Somewhere in there about explore the possibility of using existing fiber networks for distribution utilities. And ensure that we started this under standards, ensure that, any engineering standards we have will also be compatible with those of distribution utility,
Right. So
the
that, I mean,
consultation.
so the question the thing I don't know enough about it other than to just raise it as a question. The grid is a super high priority, highly protected resource in the country, like national security resource. So they don't even identify where things are on maps and all this kind of stuff. So I just don't know to what degree we're going to be able to plug sort of a civilian use of that kind of resource in, and we can find out.
They've talked to us about doing that. So I think we can just explore the possibility, and if they say, sorry, Homeland Security says no more, then that's the answer. But we need to explore the possibilities and ensure that engineering standards we adopt will be compatible with theirs if something turns out to be possible.
to every extent feasible, that's the
Right.
thing, like.
Yeah.
We're too late to make this perfect, but we've got to put it down there so that it's something that's not, that can be considered. Because Maria, do you have anything to go from here?
I think so, under the centralized resources to assist the CUDs negotiating with the owners of dark fiber, electric utilities. I think if you wanted to look at statutory proposal, the department's emergency broadband action plan had some language that allowed the leasing of strands of dark fiber owned by Velco and set an amount. That's very explicit. I don't know if you want to review that language or if you just want to say, help the CUDs access these existing fiber lines running to the substations throughout Vermont, and negotiating access to the extent, as you said, practicable.
So, Madam Chair, can I
Yes,
suggest that we
right. Yep.
steer away from being too specific and maybe missing something? For instance, I don't know that we want to specify dark fiber over lit already, or that it's going to a substation or not, or
Okay.
any of that stuff. I don't know enough about their network.
And
Okay,
not
just-
just Velco, because I do think there are others that have it, but
Okay.
please do name Velco, but also because they are sort of quasi-public, or we own part of them, right? Or
All they're owned by all the utilities.
and V-Light.
Utilities own them, but when Hydro-Quebec brought out Green Mountain, the majority of the seats in the Velco board would have gone to a foreign nation. And so we put
V-Light.
public representatives on the board.
Yeah.
So we have representatives on the board.
It's a redheaded stepchild of the state.
Yes,
Um,
some
the-
of us like Canadians.
oh, thank you, Madam Chair.
I was thinking of my grandchildren.
It was originally built to be a public entity, which
Yes.
would then be able to purchase power from, at a municipal price. And that was why it was built. And when the lawsuit came to say that other states could do the same thing, it lost its unique purpose. So maybe we could ask for the mission statement of Velco and see if we could interface with that.
I think we're just looking for a way to to tell the board we want them to look at it and to
Yeah.
make sure when we're setting up design standards that we don't preclude anything in the future. And I think that's the most we're going to get done right now, is put it on the board's list of
Yeah.
things we're interested in. Senator Bray.
So I think Senator Pearson said it, I just didn't, it went by fast. In addition to Velco, maybe are we saying also any distribution utility?
Yes.
Yes.
We've already talked about, yeah. Okay, can we agree and take a lunch break at this point? Are you ready?
No.
No? All right, let's
Kidding,
keep
kidding.
going. Be back at 1:30. We're going to take a look at something that got missed in the WEC tax section. It sounds like a technical change, so we'll fix that and
Madam
then
Chair,
we'll go back.
one issue to raise is we have time set off this afternoon to talk about the Broadband Now proposal and the affordability issue. However, the Pro Tem has called a chairs meeting, and 3 of us are involved in that. That cuts into some of the time involved. So I just want to raise that as a
Well,
flag.
the Pro Tem has told me that finance is going to get all the time it needs.
Okay. So as I
So,
say, the note just came out, so I just wanted to make sure. you were aware.
okay, I'm got my other screen on this bill, so
I'm going to
we
keep my fingers.
will. We're gonna hang with it. Maybe if we're good, we'll get to that early.
Chairs is not till 4:30.
Okay, yeah, it is 4:30, and I think we're starting with 4 to 5 is what was scheduled.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
We'll be late for chairs or we won't
Okay.
go.
Madam Chair, I'll be in Senate Ed, right, I believe about 1:30, but I'll be back as fast as possible.
Okay. All right. everybody have a good lunch. Faith, you want to take us off live?